are she, her, hers, and I am the president of AMA PDX. We'll be collecting your questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. As a reminder, we'll be recording this presentation and we'll be sending this out to all who registered. So before we get started, I did want to talk a little bit about what AMA PDX is and who we are. We are a local chapter of the National American Marketing Association, and National serves over 1.2 million marketing and sales professionals. We have 74 other professional chapters and 345 collegiate chapters. We're a nonprofit and volunteer-run organization with a mission to connect, support, and empower the Portland area marketing community through education and networking. You can learn more and join at ama-pdx.org. I also wanted to honor the original people of the land. We hold our events on unceded ancestral lands. What we now call Portland, Oregon and Multnomah County were traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Cowlitz bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Today, people from these lands have become part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, as well as the Chinook Nation and Cowlitz Nation in Washington State. We honor the Native people and lands of our area and encourage each of you to research and honor Native people in your local area. Because this is not my native tongue, thank you so much for understanding if I did not pronounce these correctly. Also, month of June, we're celebrating Pride Month. So for those of you who don't know, the month of June was chosen for Pride Month to commemorate the Stonewall riots, which occurred at the end of June in 1969. As a result, many Pride events are held during this month to recognize the impact LGBTQ+ people have had in the world. I also wanted to give a moment of silence to honor George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and thousands of others whose lives were cruelly cut short due to racial injustice in the United States. Thank you all. I also wanted to talk a little bit about our focus on DEI. So this year, AMA PDX focused on integrating DEI efforts throughout all that we do to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive events, board representation, program goals, year-long strategy, and community as a whole. We did award a surprise DEI award category at our Max Awards this year in February, and we're thrilled to be welcoming Christian Ansietti as our first VP of DEI coming into July for the next board year. And we're focusing our programming and communications all of June to celebrate DEI and Pride Month. AMA PDX created DEI guidelines as a basis for how we serve our community. We're committed to being a diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization because marketing is for everyone. You can read more at ama-pdx.org/about us, where we have our full DEI statement. I also wanted to review a few of the DEI happenings in June. So we have all of June online content on our social media for Pride Month. So I invite you all to go on there, follow us, and interact with us. And then earlier this June, we had a free virtual event, an introduction to equity communications. And then of course, we have this free virtual event, DEI panel, Our Stories. And we also have some online content tomorrow to celebrate Juneteenth, for Juneteenth commemoration. I also wanted to review some safe space ground rules. So the first one here is that everyone has equal worth. All perspectives are valid. Also, please use I statements. Own your own perspective. Don't project it. Third is believe in our common best intentions. Fourth, we encourage everyone to take a risk and speak up. We also respect everyone's right to silence and ability to pass on any question. Please maintain a judgment-free mentality. Also, we respect every other's right to be human. We honor differences as always and center them when appropriate. Family of origin, culture, orientation, race, class, gender, ability, and more. Accept and expect non-closure. And lastly, these are personal stories, so please respect a level of confidentiality when sharing these stories with others. I would like to now introduce our moderator and panelists. Our first panelist is Pharaoh Bolding. His pronouns are he, him, his. He is the Human Resources Manager at Heart Creative and a self-proclaimed world's greatest comic drawer, HR professional. He's worked with teams and organizations in everything from the tech sector to nonprofits to higher ed and even sports and entertainment, with a focus on mitigating bias, building inclusive work cultures, ethical and empathetic recruiting, and facilitating equity, diversity, and inclusion discussions and trainings. You can find more about Pharaoh and his work at pharaohbolding.com. We also have Raylan Logan. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. She's a founder of Gray Digital Marketing, a paid advertising agency that focuses on social media. She has more than a decade of experience in sales and marketing, with deep experience in the fashion and creative industries. She's a multiracial woman who grew up in a world where she didn't have a radio button that fully represented her background. Instead, she's always had to make a choice to be this, that, or the other. She spends a great deal of her free time volunteering for nonprofits, including her role as incoming VP of Programming for AMA PDX. She also helps plan events for Laced Up PDX and runs the JDRF Walk and Gala. Antoine Tolbert's pronouns are he, him, his. He is a multifaceted designer, entrepreneur, and community activist with an eye for innovation and pixel perfection, with a great understanding of the process. He's the CEO of Empyrean Perspectives, full-service design and digital marketing company since 2007. He brings with him a wealth of experience incorporating identity manipulation and brand development strategies for businesses of all sizes. EP projects range from pre-print color correction and creating new strategies for brand development, overall marketing material, to replicating campaign branding across multiple platforms. Antoine strives for understanding within a project, then facilitates and works hand in hand to achieve the project's vision. When it comes down to it, Antoine is a true applied designer using graphics to communicate the mission of any said project. He's a graduate from the University of Idaho and Portland State University and uniquely possesses the skill and passion for design in any art form. Christian Anissietti's pronouns are he, him, his. He is an accomplished, award-winning marketing and communications strategist, community leader, mentor, and social justice advocate with over a decade of experience in the private and public sectors. He's a graduate of Portland State University with a background in digital marketing, advertising, and public relations. A story of firsts, Christian was the first ever social media manager of PSU and currently the first social media manager of the Port of Portland and Portland International Airport, America's best airport. In addition to serving as a board officer for API Forward and PSU Cabigan Filipino American Student Association Alumni Advisory Board, Christian is a founding chair for 2 Asian Pacific Islander employee resource groups. A longtime AMA member dating back to serving as a PSU AMA Collegiate Chapter Officer, Christian is currently the AMA PDX VP of Communications and will become the chapter's first VP of DEI. Born in Manila, Philippines, Christian immigrated to Hillsboro, Oregon at the age of 10 and was raised in a bicultural home. His leadership journey dates back to organizing canned food and voter registration drives, volunteering in the retirement center, running a diversity club, and working with local city council at a young age. For his contributions, Christian has been recognized with industry awards, including the President's Diversity Award, Best In-House Marketing, Rising Star in Marketing, and Global Diversity Unsung Hero. In his free time, Christian enjoys houseplanting, photography, dancing in Michael Jackson thriller flash mobs, traveling, and spending time with his family. And lastly, I would like to introduce Kimfer, our moderator. Kimfer's pronouns are she, her, hers. She's a founder and principal consultant of My Kimisms, LLC, entrepreneurial in spirit, creatively minded, and service at heart. Kimfer is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience with a diverse background in art, design, communication, training, digital marketing, brand strategy, executive leadership, design thinking, and organizational development specifically focused on the idea, inclusion, diverse equals diversity plus equity plus accessibility, to build culture from the inside out. She's also an adjunct professor and has her MBA in executive leadership. So thanks all. I will pass it over to Kimfer.
Here we are. Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful conversation. I had the pleasure of speaking with all the panelists earlier in the week, and I think you're going to be hear some really wonderful stories, and especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Unlike certain topics, we are not specifically focused on per se on allyship, but that will come up. We're not specifically focused on racial injustices, but that will also come up. We're not specifically focused on immigrants and intersectionality, but guess what? That's all going to come up as well. So with that, I'll give you a little bit of background besides my bio, is that where my intersectionality comes in. Not only am I a woman, I am an Asian American woman who was adopted from Korea. So my immigrant story is even different than majority of the immigrant stories, where I am an immigrant but became a citizen very quickly because of the adoption process, which means there's a lot of cultural norms that were left behind, and what we would consider becoming very whitewashed when I was adopted to the Midwest with no one that looked like me, or even spoke my language. And then interesting enough for me, I had an opportunity, and this sounds really strange, but I went through poverty twice. Once while I was in Korea before I was adopted, and then went through poverty again when I was adopted to the US, because I was adopted into a farm community, and in the 80s, that's when the farm crisis hit. However, when we look at intersectionality, which you're basically looking at not only racial, but also you're talking about socioeconomic, you're talking about education. I am in my mid 40s, is now someone who is probably in that power group of when it comes to socioeconomic class. I have that. I am educated person, etc. So these kind of intersectionality is really what makes this world very interesting, right? And so I think you'll get to see some of these stories come out from the rest of the panelists, and so excited to get started. So enough about me, let's get started. And I'm gonna start with you, Christian. So get yourself unmuted and get ready. Why don't you share with us your story and your journey into DEI?
Thanks so much, Kimfer. Good evening, everyone. So good to see the community come together tonight. You know, as a lot of you heard from my bio, my DEI journey really dates back to my immigration from the Philippines at the age of 10. You know, after many years of both of my parents working abroad, both in the US and in Canada to support their children, my brother and I finally came to the US back in 1997 for a better life. You know, since that time, I've lived in a bicultural home, living with my Filipino mother and Caucasian stepfather, along with mixed race siblings. You know, at a young age, I've had a love for different cultures, you know, especially experiencing that firsthand in the household. You know, this is often reflected in the very food and dishes that my family and I would prepare. So for example, during Thanksgiving, you look at the dining table and you see all the traditional Thanksgiving dishes from left to right becoming on the right side of the table, Filipino food like the noodles and the lumpia and the Filipino desserts that my mom over the years would enjoy making. And so really at a young age, this love and passion for different cultures has been embedded in my life. While I live in a very loving home that again embrace both Filipino and American culture, I also navigated the world at a young age, not knowing what it meant to be Filipino. And you know, as a person of color living in Portland, the whitest city in America, I remember you know, starting 5th grade here in the US, and my classmates asking me who I was, and that I felt like I needed to identify and tell them that I was Hawaiian to feel like I belong, and to feel like you know, that I was accepted to be here in the United States. my interest to learn a lot more about my roots and at the same time give back to a community that has given me here in the US really inspired activism at a young age. You know, as mentioned in my bio, from camp food drives in elementary school, volunteering at the local retirement center, working with ESL students after school and middle school, and then becoming a president of a diversity club and getting involved in student government. I immersed myself in every opportunity to get involved and use activism to give back. Finally, when I entered college at Portland State, I became involved with KBIGAN, the Filipino American Student Association on campus, which was really the place that allowed me to not only build a community with fellow Filipino Americans, but also a lot of them I become lifetime friends with. You know, that's something that I'm really proud of. But also that organization allowed me to embrace and better understand my Filipino roots. So this long history of activism have really led me to where I am today in terms of how I look at DEI and how I look at the world in terms of how we treat each other, how I show up in social justice spaces where, in my opinion, it's easy for us to oppress one another and say, you don't know what oppression means, or you don't know what white privilege means, then why are you here? I feel like there's a space and time for that, but I've always found it more transformative when we approach this work with love. You know, it's one thing to hold, you know, folks accountable, or it's one thing to call people out, but it's another to hold folks accountable. And so that's a little bit of how I got to where I am today and my journey around DEI.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Again, I think what it's going to be great for everyone that's attending to hear these stories like yours, immigrant story. I think there's going to be bits of the story that all of you, as you're listening, that you're probably going to be able to connect with, and some that you will have no idea how to connect with. And that's part of the reason why we're here with these stories, to have others to share as well. And I think Christian, like mentioning the idea about needing to sort of hide your identity, I think, you know, you called it identity denial as early as 10 years old. That's pretty intense, right? Or the idea of like the whole oppression Olympics that sometimes have is I'm more oppressed than you are. You're, you know, like all of that happens within this space. But thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to go to Farrell now. And if you could tell me your story and then your journey into DEI and where you are right now.
Yeah. So for me, before I knew what the word diversity, equity, inclusion were, before I even had a grasp of the concepts, I had been doing the work anyway. Before I got into human resources, the wild and wonderful world of human resources, I spent years working in a lot of different sectors, and I was always that employee who brought up when something was wrong, when someone was being harmed, when someone was being oppressed. And I didn't have the language for it at the time. When I decided to ultimately go back to college in my late 20s and get a degree in human resources, the reason I went into human resources is because of the human aspect of human resources. For me, my work is about impacting people and about holding organizations accountable for the negative impact they have on the people that work for them. And it's been very interesting because I've realized that in the world of human resources, a lot of folks who even practice HR aren't necessarily on the same boat when it comes to the human aspect of HR. And that's kind of what drives me to do the work that I do. I like to make sure that I'm supremely atypical for what people expect from an HR person. I think that speaks for itself. And part of that is, for me, this EDI journey, or what I like to call this equity and inclusion journey, and talking about these issues, is I realized that if I got into HR, I could be a voice for people that don't always have a voice. And that's not me trying to be a martyr. I get to bend somebody's ear that typically wouldn't let somebody like me bend their ear. I mean, I'm a poor Black kid from Detroit. I'm not supposed to be sitting there having this conversation with y'all right now. The circumstances of who I am came from a lot of very unique circumstances that found me in the situation that I am in now. And a big part of that was learning how to talk to white people. Because for years I would scream, I'd holler, I'd be so angry, I'd just be enraged. I'd be talking about these things and I'd just be like, why are you not hearing me? And then it clicked. It was like, well, maybe we should find a language so white people can hear me. It hasn't worked. I'll just be fair and honest with you. I threw some darts at the board. I missed the board. I've learned that part of this journey is realizing that no matter what kind of words you have, no matter how many $5,000 words you bring to the conversation, no matter how skilled you are with having difficult conversations, if internally someone doesn't want to hear you, they're not going to hear you. So that's just going to be a waste of your energy, time, and resources. But you can't allow that to stop you from pushing, from making these things happen. So in every organization I've worked for, every organization I'm a part of, every organization I volunteer with, I'm the person that makes people squirmy. Uncomfortable is my jam. I'll be hanging out and uncomfortable like I got a summer home there. Because the thing is this, it's like, we might as well make you uncomfortable about these topics. We might as well make you embrace the discomfort. I'm uncomfortable every day. I have to work in spaces that were never meant for me. I have to work knowing that I'm tokenized. I work in a city that's supremely white, and 99.9% of the HR folks in this city are white, and a large portion of them are white cisgender women. So I'm already against the odds. I'm an anomaly in the unicorn when I'm doing it anyway, and I know companies look at me that way. I know when people reach out to me for assistance, they look at me that way. So it's my perfect opportunity to make people uncomfortable, because I'm uncomfortable in your spaces every day. We might as well be uncomfortable together and deal with some things. And for me, that's this whole journey, that's this whole process. It's finding comfort in discomfort and helping people find comfort in discomfort, because what people don't realize, that's a very comforting thing. That's your body telling you that something ain't right, and then maybe you need to dive a little deeper, and maybe you need to figure out why you're feeling so triggered about the Aunt Jemima label on the syrup bottle. And maybe we should unpack that a little bit, and you should deal with your discomfort, and maybe you'll get to the realization that you've been contributing to the white supremacy in your life.
Oh, I just want to say preach. Yeah, so, this is the thing I love about your story, Farrell, is that, like that's where the growth can happen, or that's when people shut down, right? It's that discomfort. And I love the fact that you're like, that's where I feel comfort in it, is in that discomfort, in that squirmy place. And, and you're there to like try to get people through that. And that is something that you're signing up for. And we have to say, like, kudos to you for that. And I think, and you might all agree with me here, and it's not going to be necessarily for all in the marginalized group, people of color, but I think intentionally or unintentionally, we just take up this role, even if you have a title or not. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And we'll come back to you about some of the other things that you talked about. So in the meantime, Ray, you want to tell us a little bit about your story and your journey into DEI?
Absolutely. Well, first, guys, I'm super blessed to be on a panel with you guys, so thank you. Farrell, you are one of my absolute favorite people, and you just crack me up. So I'm so glad that you can make that squirminess happen while making me laugh.
I appreciate that.
Well, unlike Farrell, I grew up learning how to talk white very, very naturally. I was born when my dad was attending law school. So I grew up in fairly affluent areas. And what has been so great about that is, I get to see the world from a different lens, just like every single person on this call. But I grew up multiracial from both sides of my family. So my dad, he's now a judge. He's Black, white, and Native. My mom is a nurse. She's white and Native. My stepmom, who I'm incredibly close to, is Hawaiian and Portuguese. And my little bit, who you can see in this frame right here, is all of me and half Asian. So for me, my world is incredibly colorful and always has been. But right now, like the epicenter of what we're all facing is Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. And I'm sure you guys just picked up on my opinion of that, as well as the COVID crisis. And for me, that's everything that I've grew up around. And so I feel like society's trying to pull me in one direction or the other, but the reality is it is my life. And that kind of puts me in a very unique position to be able to come to this panel and speak with everybody and maybe offer a different perspective. I have privilege. I think everybody should know that. I am very privileged to be able to be white passing when I choose. And I am very privileged to be a woman who has been able to get by with her looks. And I don't say that to like make anybody feel some type of way, but I want you to know that on the flip side of that, I have faced racism as well as most prominently microaggressions more than anything else. And those microaggressions are kind of like razor cuts to the soul. And they sound a little something like this. I took some notes. Can I touch your hair? You're so much prettier when your hair's straight. You are so whitewashed. Do you have the same parents? Which one of your parents is Black? You're lucky you don't have to be smart because you're hot. Should you be in this class? It's honors. So what are you? Or my absolute favorite, but you're not Black.
Oh, Black. That's always a good one. Yeah.
It's a beautiful one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Those are cringeworthy. They're truly cringeworthy. And imagine having to learn how to deal with that smiling every single day with a polite answer every single day of your life. Every single day since elementary school. It hurts. It really, really hurts. And so for my journey, it's finding a graceful way to let people know, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't say that. And I've had to face a lot of these things. It didn't really come to reality for me until I was about in my 20s. But it has shaped my whole life. And maybe I didn't realize it because I didn't grow up like Pharaoh in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So to me, it just seemed like questions kids would ask. But they're not questions that kids should have to hear. And so for me, on my side of my DEI journey, my whole reason for being here is for that little one who's being born right now, who's mixed, or any part of the POC community, never has to feel or have to have the same stories that myself, Pharaoh, Kempfer, or Christian have had to have, or Antoine. Because our world's better than this. And I think we're seeing that in everything that we're facing today, that we can be better than this. And it's going to happen by us all sharing those courageous conversations and these stories so we can really, truly begin to see everybody as humans and not groups.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Those microaggressions, and what's really interesting is that there are many people still don't understand the word microaggressions. Or is there possibly, we might have some folks on the line that may be hearing for the first time, and that's okay, because some of these, you're going to hear lots of new words, possibly, and some of you that it's this old hat, right? And it's those, like you said, razor cuts. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And the idea of that someone says, like, yeah, but that's not that big of a deal asking to touch someone's hair. It actually is. When you may never ask that of someone else, right? Of a different culture. That's where when you're trying to do something that is specifically calling out because of the differences, but not in a positive way, right? It's so exotic, it's foreign. And so this idea is a really interesting one. You know, Farah, you're like, I had to learn how to talk to white people. And Raylan, you're like, I already knew how to talk to white people because that's the way that I kind of grew up. And then Christian and I are a pretty interesting place because we're both immigrants, just slightly in a different way, and had to learn to assimilate in a way, and within the model minority group, where we're considered the model minority, right? The ones that are the smart ones, the ones that are the quiet ones, the ones that most people are like okay with, that we're the ones that gets measured against, which happens a lot for the Black community. Why can't you be more like them, etc. So all of that comes up, and obviously we can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and our stories right now without really talking about what's happening. So we are, in almost going into week 4 of what's going into the Black Lives Matter movement, not a moment. And it is a pandemic for those of you, when people use words like this, it is a pandemic. And it has been around for 400 years, at least in the US and in various other parts of the world, even longer. And, we're looking at the current state of everyone trying to fight for this injustice that's been going on. And this is a question that I have for all of you. And I think I'm going to start with you, Raylan, in just a second, is why do you think that George Floyd's murder created the worldwide cry for injustice, for Black lives, and, police brutality, even though like Rodney King in 1992, and with the LA riots, which were the uprising happened, Trayvon Martin in 2012 in Florida, or Michael Brown in 2014 when Ferguson, Missouri happened. And there were protests then, but why? Why is this so different?
Well, Kempfer, heavy question, but the reason that I think that we might be seeing it as different is because right now the whole world, not just Portland, outside of here, guys, everyone's facing COVID, and your options for the news right now are COVID or watching George Floyd die. And when George Floyd died, this was all like another roller coaster moment up the hill, because we've gone through multiple of them, as you had just stated. But, right after Ahmaud, right after Breonna, and it's just like another one, like enough. But not just another one enough like we've seen in the past, but one of those, gosh, my only option right now is to see people dying from a disease or watching people die from police brutality, and you can't get away from it. There's no going to the bar on Friday to turn it off. There is no finding an outlet of going to the gym and working it out. We don't have that. You're at home and you have to face it. You have to realize what's happening. And so when we look at this, we kind of have to see it in that light. COVID did impact our ability to notice this, but we also have to look at who our primary protesters are. They are millennials and they are Gen Zers. And yes, we have a mix of everybody else in there, but primarily that's who's protesting. For us as millennials, I'm going to speak to being a millennial and being a part of Gen Z, you feel very far removed. But the reality is your grandparents probably saw Jim Crow end. So to us, we don't understand because we went to school with everybody for the most part. Like, my friend group is incredibly diverse. And when you look at that, there's a basic understanding that you don't see other than why can't we be equal with everybody? And so I have a lot of hope that this will make it better, but I do think the pandemic put a big moment into that. And I would really love to hear kind of like Pharaoh, Antoine, Christian's perspective on this, but that is mine.
And really quick, I wanted to pop in and say we also have Antoine. He joined a little bit late, so I want to make sure that he also has a chance to speak.
Well, Antoine's an amazing friend of mine, guys, so you really do need to hear his story. So Antoine, go for it.
Hi, Antoine. Welcome. So before we go on to the other question, or why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your story and your journey into DEI now.
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see everybody again. And apologies for being late for those who are viewing and those who are here. Gosh, I'd like to say that I was born literally with a crayon or a marker or something like that of the nature in my hand coming out the womb. It was one of those things where I was so fortunate enough to be raised by a woman who was very artistic, and there was nothing that she couldn't do. And so she said that I was the only one that she domesticated, and that was my grandmother, and she was white. So I grew up in very rural areas throughout the Pacific Northwest. I remember being kicked out of school for doing graffiti on my notebook of my name in Everett, Washington. Like, I think I might have been like in 6th grade. I was doing tattoos for local gang members in 7th grade. I was doing all the jackets for heavy metal groups. And I mean, I was just that guy, or that young kid. I later went to the University of Idaho, which, like, outside of the educational sector, I didn't run into any problems really at all. It was actually within the system or in the institution that I received most flack, and that was when I had graduated Benson in architecture, so I was a little more, I guess, advanced than others. Went to the university, and they were wasting like a lot of money on prereqs and things that I had already done in high school. And so I went to challenge or ask the dean if they could test me out or if I could, get placed where I need to be placed at. And they thought that that was kind of interesting that a young Black boy from Portland, Oregon would try to change their system and how they did things. So that ended up actually causing me to change my major and becoming a designer, which then later on moved me into a marketer. And yeah, but I still create for sure. So that is the nutshell version of all that.
Well, thanks, Antoine. I think you're seeing some thematics here. Again, more intersectionality within how we grow up, how we grew up, and where we are that puts us in the place that we are. And again, to take that story that Antoine just shared, and we were focusing on, why is this so different now? And I really wanted to kick that question back over to Farrell as well, as to like, why is it different now than all the other times?
Oh, well, thank you for sharing, Antoine. I'm glad you were able to make it. It's not. Like, if we can be like real, it's not. People want it to feel like it is. Because for whiteness, there's gratification and achievement, no matter how false that achievement really is. But it's not. We got a captive audience. It's what Raylan was saying. Like, people were sitting at home and they couldn't go to Starbucks and get away from it. They couldn't go hike and get away from it. They couldn't go do everything that whiteness typically does to get away from it. They couldn't just post it on their Instagram and keep moving and be like, I did a thing today. So people went outside and people are protesting. And that's great and wonderful and fine. And I don't want to diminish the work that people are putting in out in the streets of protesting in any way. But my eternal question will always be, why now? Your people have been killing my people for 400 years. What's so special about now? Like, my people, you're out in the streets protesting, and my people are hanging from trees, and it's being declared suicides. So, what are you achieving? Like, I've seen on social media these lists that people put together, like, look at us, we're doing it. We've done this, this, and this, and they've added this law. And it's like, okay, is it victory lap cookie time already? Like, this is one thing. You're addressing one thing. You didn't even make the blooming onion. You just threw a whole onion in the fryer, and now you think you've done a thing. You didn't even slice the petals to make it open. It's like, there's so many layers to so much of this. It's like, okay, so we got 1,500 other battles too. Are y'all gonna be around in like 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, 2 years from now? Or is this just something you're gonna tell your family and friends to lord over the other white folks and the other people of culture who have privilege that telling them like we did a thing, we were a part of a movement, It's like it's not a movement if it's not sustained. Like, people of culture have been out here fighting these fights since the formation of this colonized and ceded land. Like, this isn't like y'all just catching up. Like, this is just another Thursday. We've been showing y'all video footage since they came up with video cameras on phones. Like, this isn't the first video we've seen of a black body being snuffed out in front of for everyone to see. Like, what is it about now that I'm supposed to trust that you care now? Like, and I know that, and I don't mean to be facetious, and I don't mean to come off as mean, but I'm tired. You know, it's like y'all are mad because they kind of take Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima off of packages. Y'all are mad because Elmo was trying to explain racism to children. But this is a moment, you know, this is a movement. But it's not. If you're mad at Elmo, how are you processing anything? It's Elmo. Who's mad at Elmo? It's Elmo. You know, it's who's mad about a syrup package? A straight up mammy characterization syrup package. How is that ruining your life? How is I have to wear a mask a form of slavery to some people? Like, you have to, like, what never gets really understood and disseminated in all these conversations is that whiteness operates on getting to not have to worry about things. And when they do worry about things, taking it over and making it their own. What I'm seeing is white people are like, we care about racism now. It's like, that's wonderful. Am I supposed to be impressed? You made it. Like, you don't care about the things that you made. This is your invention. The rest of us were chilling in our own countries and lands and everything else. The folks who were here were chilling, minding their business on this land. You came and killed them, brought them here, then kidnapped and put their folks in cages for over 300 years. And now suddenly, because you care about the police killing a man, I'm supposed to believe we're changing now? That's just something that's not a pill I can swallow. I want to see you in 6 months. I want to see you in a year. I want to see you keep doing this work. I don't want you to be like, well, we did that thing. Now we're all going to go back inside. Because they're still killing my people. They're still killing the indigenous folks that we don't ever talk about in this country at all. They're killing Black trans people at record numbers, and the cases are going unchecked. I mean, my own people are killing our Black trans women because of the nasty generational trauma we're carrying around, and we're not able to heal that. Like, my people are hurting. We've been hurting for centuries. It's you caring about the police all of a sudden doesn't change that you should have been on board 200 years ago, 100 years ago. Hell, last week, 50 years ago, you should have been on board. This isn't like you get to hop on the train now when we're doing a thing.
Ooh, that's a lot, Farrell. It's a lot. I mean, just like sheer numbers, like you're talking about as well, is 125 more people have died in the last 20 days in the Black community while this is all happening. So I hear you. Like, even if you go through some of your, I think, Instagram and social media, you're starting to see people like starting to post their happy-go-lucky selves again and enjoying the next phase of COVID and being out and smiley faces. And so I get that. I get that as well. Christian, have some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think just in the context of, a marketing association putting on this event, I think my response to that question, Kimfer, is I think more than ever, the world has access to information, technology, and social media that really allow us to hold systems and institutions like the police accountable more than ever. I mean, just to bring some data and stats to life, according to Hootsuite, Facebook has more than 2.45 billion monthly active users. An average of 3 hours are spent per day per person on social networks. 91% of all social media users access social channels via mobile devices. Almost 80% of total time spent on social media sites occurs on mobile platforms. So I think, in my opinion, that's why we're seeing how the world is responding to current events more than ever, because of that very access to information and technology and social media more than ever. I think I also want to mention, the world, in my opinion, is agitated. I hate to bring politics to this space, but I have to. We live in the most powerful country in the world, with a sitting president that has unleashed messages of hate and intolerance, and made decisions that have resulted to families and children being locked up in cages. The world is not going to put up with that anymore. We're agitated, and this is the time to truly use our voices to see the change that we want to see.
Thanks, Christian, for that perspective as well. I'm going to curtail the presidency for now, just because my blood pressure will rise so high, and I want to keep hearing about your stories. So I'm going to kind of shift with this, because we brought up like social media. That's part of it, is that we are sort of in this state where we can't just walk away, because we can't. Not that we can't, we can. We don't have the kind of options that we used to, like Raylan said, like going to the bar on a Friday night, like Pharaoh said, like going for a hike and all of this, and just kind of shut it out. And so with all of that, we're also then seeing, because the pressure from the individual, the way that companies are also responding. And Christian, you're talking about the power of these organizations. And, what's happening right now is that I see a lot of performative and a lot of opportunistic allyship. I'm going to put that in quotation. That's happening not only from individuals, from brands as well. And this is a American Marketing Association event. So I feel like we need to talk a little bit about this from a marketer's perspective, and why this is happening, the communications that are coming out from leaders. And I'm going to say that very loosely, the word leaders from organizations. And, I'm going to give this question to Antoine, knowing that you do own your own company, and this idea of this performative, I'm going to put a black square on my Instagram site. I'm going to put a word out that we're really diverse, like anthropology, and having their internal people come out and say BS to that, which is, you're seeing a lot, and things like that. So Antoine, what are your thoughts about this? Are you seeing any brands that are doing it right? Or are you, how do you think about this responsibly as someone who leads their own agency?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
I'm not making it easy for any of you. People are here to hear some stories.
All right, brother, you swung the bat to warm up. Now you better hit this out the park. I would say that, for one, what does doing it right look like? Right? What does that look like? I remember in school they told you that art is in the eye of the beholder, but more so in the person who created it. Does it meet the mission in which they were desiring it to meet, right? And so on that concept, like I saw Nike's ad the other day, and they're not doing it anymore, which is like, I gotta say, that's genius. That's great. They're not doing it. I said, damn, I should have like purchased like domain names saying like not doing it, right? Like, that makes so much sense. But also the other question is what are your motives in doing it? What does your company still look like? What does the higher ups in your company still look like? I mean, they may all bleed red, but I'm saying, do they look like brothers and sisters of that copper color complexion? Are they women who feel empowered, who are empowered? Are they Black men who are empowered and know that they're empowered? And so I think if that is the goal and mission, then I don't see too many companies really hitting that goal. I see them placating or playing into it, joining with the movement. Like you said, let's go ahead and mark off, let's make the screen black. like truly, I think if something really wanted to be done, like brand wise, if you take the dollar sign and just drew an X right through it and had nobody spend anything, like just shut it down. Just shut it down, right? Like shut it down. Then what, right? Because the millennials are told to be the most what is that, in debt bracket, right? That means their buying power is large. Their parents buy for them. Okay, so that means their spending power is even larger. But I'm not here to preach to the choir. I'm here to talk about marketing. So I think if for me, I automatically think of branding things and doing things. I would think, how could I take that a next step further where it actually has impactful action? Not just like, oh my God, there's like 50 million black screens. That's great. Because even in that, I heard the messages were skewed. It wasn't supposed to be for all businesses, but for some businesses. And okay, well, if you stop spending, that's everything, right? And so I'm just saying, the question really for me is, what are their motives? What does it look like when it's done right? And who's truly benefiting at the end of the day?
I think that's, yeah, who's truly benefiting at the end of the day and what's really happening on the inside. And I think, with this change and Raylan, like talking about millennials and the younger generation that are coming in, the Gen Zers and Gen Is, I guess, that are coming up, they're looking for a place that has purpose, right? Purpose driven. And that's why I think, this is my opinion, why we're seeing employees calling BS on their own companies and their own company statement. They're like, nah, that's not what's happening inside. So, F with that. Great, produce comms letter to sound really good, right? It's no longer outward facing anymore. And I think as for those of you on this group that are marketers, like it has to be authentic. That idea of authenticness has to come through. And if that means even saying like, you know what, we effed up, we haven't been doing it right, and we apologize that we have to do it because of this event in history, but now we're committed, right? And then put some actions behind it. Again, I'm done preaching I'm done preaching as well. But we can't also think about like today, what's happening. Obviously, tomorrow is Juneteenth. It's a day that I think, sadly, because it is hugely a pride month, that unless you're part of the Black community, most people are probably hearing Juneteenth for the first time really ever this year, and the significance of Juneteenth, right? And it is because really this month, talking about corporatization of DEI that happens, which is to kind of do that takeover and all the pride flags and everywhere. And it's literally, it is research, is the biggest corporatized event when it comes to DEI efforts. And, with that, we can't talk about pride without talking about what's happening with Black trans lives, right? So we're talking about this intersection, like these crazy Venn diagrams of things, that's why I brought up the idea of intersectionality earlier is, with the Supreme Court ruling just this Monday, right? About we're going to now continue to uphold Title VII. Great. But that actually covers not only, persons' sexual preference, but actually their gender, and all of that, that's protected across the nation. And that was a big win, not just because of the queer community, but also for the rights of the trans community, which is part of the queer community. But why is it that this intersection is so big for people that it's that much harder for people to get behind? Black trans lives. And I'm gonna give this one to Ray. You ready for that question? What are your thoughts?
I am. I can't speak to why it's hard for others. I can only speak to my experience, but it kind of goes back to that topic of courageous conversations like I was speaking on before. So outside of marketing, outside of all my volunteer efforts, I have coached cheer for quite a long time up until recently. And at one of the high schools that I coached at, it was a predominantly Black school. And I'm gonna make up a name. We're going to call this person Braylon. Really close to my own name, so sorry everybody, but that's as good as we're getting right now, Braylon. So Braylon was on the dance team. He was gay, and he always wanted to cheer too. So come his senior year, he's like, I'm gonna cheer and dance. Cool. At the same time, I knew that he was wanting to transition. And I remember the beginning of cheer season, because it starts about now, being like, hey, we have to order uniforms. And me having to say, I have to choose to let him have a choice. And I was like, Braylon, do you want pants or would you like a skirt? Like, I just asked. And I let him make that decision in that moment. Now, fast forward to when we get our uniforms, I had one young lady quit, and Braylon came in and noticed that skirt would fit him. Now, at the time, when we fast forward, we're now calling Braylon her, because that is her preferred pronouns at this point in time. But she wanted to wear that skirt, and we were about to go out on the football field, and I was like, yeah, here, sure. So the athletic director comes up to me, and the principal comes up to me, and they're like, oh, well, why are we doing that? Like, all these things, this, that, and the other. And I was like, no, that is her choice. That is her life. And she deserves to live it the way she feels most empowered to live it. I go, and we're not going to stop that. She cheered in her skirt and everybody left her alone. But if it wasn't for me saying, no, let her live her life, it could have been a completely different story. And we look at Black trans lives, guys, they have the highest suicide rate out of anybody. And it's going to take those of us who are not trans to step in and say, I support you. I'm here to help you. And I stand by you, to have them feel comfortable enough in their skin. I mean, they're not represented really anywhere, like kind of on TV. But the concept of trans is very foreign to so many people, and we're so afraid of what we don't know. We're so afraid of change, and like Pharaoh said, those squirmy conversations. But if we don't dive into those, we don't get like nitty gritty, how are we going to be able to help them? How are we going to be able to hear their stories when we make it so hard for them to share? And so I don't know how we can fix it other than saying we need to have courageous conversations. But I hope we all can, with everything that's going on. I'll learn.
Yeah, thank you actually for sharing that story of Braylon. And like it's crazy. And so for those of you who are more stats heavy, the average life in the trans community, especially in the Black trans community, is 35 years. I mean, when the hell is the last time that someone lived as an average life at 35? Like when was that? And so that tells you, I think, something really intensely as to what's going on as well, and with this idea, right, of not only trans lives, but we are again then thinking about this whole conversation about is our stories, marginalization, intersectionality. And so what are some of your thoughts? And maybe those of you might be part of the queer community. I am one of those that I look very heteronormative in the sense that I have a husband and a child. And so when it comes to being part of the queer community, people are always like, oh, what? You are? Right? Kind of a question that gets up. And so it's one of those like things that you could hide if you want to, I guess, but you shouldn't have to. What are your thoughts about, just pride in general? It's considered the month of like major celebration. It's about the glitter and rainbows and love is love and all of that. And that sense of celebration in that same kind of way is diffused, and for some might feel like had to take a step back because of the Black Lives Movement right now. And what are some of your thoughts around that? I'm going to give this one. I don't think we've heard from Christian in a little bit. So Christian, thoughts?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think what I'm going to share is a little bit of how we're treating this at work. So working at the Port of Portland. As I mentioned in my bio earlier, I co-chair the Asian Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group at the Port of Portland. And I'm also a member of the communications team for my employer. And, I think having DEI being an important value to my employer, it's really important for stakeholders within the organization to talk about. While it is Pride Month in June, we also need to be cognizant and sensitive to the fact that Black Lives Matter is the message that the organization wants to prioritize. And that is not to say that any other messages, including Pride, is not important, but it's truly, asking the question, whose voices are we centering? Whose efforts do we, as an organization, want to elevate first and foremost before, maybe switching our social media avatars to the rainbow overlay and saying that this is something that's also important to us. And so what that has looked like at the Port is having and really taking the time and the due diligence to have conversations with the members of, for example, our Alliance of Black Employees, Employee Resource Group, and also having conversations with our LGBTQ plus Employee Resource Group, and really giving them the space and time to provide, again, as a member of the communications team, feedback and input as to, yes, these are important initiatives for our organization, but with our organization primarily also being focused on racial equity, when the Port of Portland had launched this initiative on DEI 2 or 3 years ago, it is important for us to center the voices of our Black employees. And therefore that needs to be communicated accordingly, on our website or our social media. And so that's a little bit of how we've experienced, or I've experienced that as a member of an organization that has grappled with, these are messages that are important to our organization, but whose voices are we centering ultimately?
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing that. It's the idea of whose voices are we centering. I had this conversation that I recently interviewed someone, and they were talking about how, if you have to worry about, do I put a black box up or do I put a rainbow box up on my logo? Like, you're concerned about the wrong thing right now, the wrong thing, right? And I think that's back to the marketing and back to the looking at it from a business side. I think that's the things like marketers, as people are advising their executives and things like that. Right now, you could do either or neither, long as what you're doing internally is what you really need to look at. A question came in already, and for those of you that have questions, please send them. I know Amber is gathering them up, and I get to see them in the back end. So there's actually a question that came up that said, what is the panel's take on the 600 and rising movement in the design and creative space? Everyone who joins is releasing their company's diversity report. Is this progress, or is this also disingenuous? Or do you think it's something else? And just to give you all a sort of a contextual, the 600 movement is around in the creative agency is they are around 600 Black agency professionals calling for end to systemic racism, an open letter to an industry leader led by Nathan Young. Interesting enough, used to work with Nathan back in the day when he was in Seattle, but he is now in Minneapolis at an agency 4 blocks away from where George Floyd was killed. Even if you are in agency life or not, or know about this story or not, just I think it's the question is really the contextual question about demanding the release of their company's diversity report. Do you feel like this is progress, or is this disingenuous? I'm going to put this to Pharaoh, HR. I feel like you might have an answer for this personally, and then from a, like a organization perspective as well.
I'm gonna answer from an organizational perspective first because they intersect. I used to work in higher ed and human resources, and there came a moment where we were asked to put together basically a diversity report to show retention rates over a 3 to 5 years period of time for employees of culture, and then breaking it down for Black employees, for Latinx, for our Chicano employees, for our API employees, to kind of break it down to see what our retention rates were. And then comparing that number to our retention rates for our white employees. The end result ended up being a spin, where basically the numbers weren't great for the persons of culture. But when we weigh it out against the white employees, it's not that bad. They're only a few percentage points off. And that's when you know deep down inside that we're gonna do nothing, aren't we? Because it's like, you decided to find a way to spin the fact that people of color don't want to work for us. And you've been trying, and that's what these systems always are. I've been in HR for some time now, and I've had the conversation about where do we find all the Blacks, and where do we find all the Chinese folks, and where do we find this, that, and the other. I have literally sat in meetings where people are like, well, we hired a lot of Chinese people last year, so I think we're good now. And it's like, so you're checking boxes. It's all a game of checking boxes. It's like, it's great if you hired a bunch of people of culture last year. Are they still going to be here in 2 years? That's not the number that people ever really want to look at. Are they staying? Are you building something where people actually feel like they want to work for you? We can spin numbers all day. I can make all sorts of charts and reports and make it look nice and throw a picture on there so you look over to the right instead of the left and don't really look at the numbers too hard. I can find all sorts of ways to make numbers look wonderful and make things look very balanced or make us look okay as an organization. But if we're not going to take those numbers and really be like, oh, we have a problem, then what's the point of releasing a diversity report? Especially when you release a diversity report, I'm sure that a lot of these companies are going to release their reports, and some of these reports are not going to be great. I would say probably the vast majority of them are not going to look super great when you really look at them. But who's going to hold them accountable for it? We're talking about organizations that don't listen to their employees, don't listen to the communities that they serve in a real way, don't listen to the constituencies and the communities that ripple out from the people they employ. They're worried about their bottom line and their dollars. Like they're also worried about how they look to the public. So they'll release their report, it'll look kind of rough, they'll say we'll do better, and that will appease the 90% of folks who are like, well, they said they're gonna do better. And this is where my personal opinion comes into it. Like, I've worked for companies where I literally know they're not going to do anything. And I've watched over the past few weeks as they've released their wonderful little statements and their wonderful little PR spins saying that they're going to do better. We're dedicating ourselves, making sure, everybody gets Juneteenth off and all that jazz. And yeah, I want Juneteenth off. That sounds nice. I'll always take another day off, especially when it's one where I can talk about representing my people. But could you maybe get rid of Bob, an accountant who's been super racist for the last 6 years? Can we get rid of that a senior director that's like really rapey and really handsy and makes all of the feminine identifying folks in the office uncomfortable that we've been telling you about for years? Can we do cultural organizational change? If we take this information, can I hold you accountable for this information? Yeah, I want Juneteenth, but I also want these places to suck less. That's really where I'm at with this, personally and professionally. I don't want to work somewhere where it sucks, and I don't want to see people having to stay in positions where it sucks just because they need to make a living. We can do better. It's just companies need to choose to do better.
Well, I think that's the quote tonight. Want to work at a place that suck less. Like, but it's true. Like, interesting enough, like I had this quote from this gentleman named Alan Mulally, who was the CEO of Ford during the auto crisis. Again, not surprising, it's a white man, but one of the things that I really loved about what he said is that you can't manage a secret. And so for me, response to that, Farrah, is that publish it, even if it sucks, because you now have to figure out what to do with it, right? It's what I've noticed more in my DI consulting is that they see the score and then they decide not to publish it because they saw the score and they're like, oh, we can't publish that. I'm like, nope, do it, because now it's out there and you've got to do it. And so I think that's something as well. And just wondering, and especially Antoine, you are in the creative space, in the design space, what are your thoughts about what's happening with the 600 and Rising movement, about joining in and releasing the company diversity report?
I think it's a good start. I give me E for effort for sure. Once again, who's benefiting at the end of the day? Who else? Like, just because the number's up, what are you going to do to adjust that number? Who's going to come back in to make certain that score doesn't change, right? Are you going to hire a consultant to come in there and say, yeah, you're too white, or you're too this, or you're too that? You need to adjust numbers within the next 30 days, or we're going to give you a fine that's going to benefit all of the Black people that you're not trying to hire in the first place. There's different ways to go about that, right? But I think it's a good effort. I just, for me, I had to avoid that, because Pharaoh and others, to some degree, can allow their skin to callous over the racist Bobs and Stans and Karens, and have to be subject to that environment. Yeah, I couldn't do it. So I went ahead and started my own business. But in a sense, like what Ray was saying earlier, is that that's maybe a privilege that I have that others don't have, right? Just up and just start a business, just think they can up and do it. To me, there's always another side to, actually, there's two sides of the coin, right? And we just happen to look on either theirs or ours, or forget that there's actually one that divides us two, that if we were actually to reason together, we can go right on down wherever we need to go to, and we both benefit, we all benefit. And so if this movement has the outcome where everyone benefits, truly benefits, then I will champion that all day long. I will go out there at 6 o'clock just to represent and ding on chimes and ring bells and kick cans, okay? Just to be in support. But for some reason, I doubt that. I truly do. I think it's going to be good for the next 30, 60 days, and it's going to go downhill. And it's just what it's going to be.
I think that's actually a good segue, because what we're talking about is, I'm going to bring up the word allyship, being an ally. Again, I will preface this. It's not a badge you get to wear. You do not get to tell yourself you're an ally. You have to act it. I'm going to put that out there. But with all of this that's going on, and you're prediction that, hey, once, you know, COVID starts lifting up and people can go outside and get distracted, as soon as like they're exhausted of being in this moment, and we'll start, you know, weaning. Because we also hear about, and I want to be very careful, we talk about what's the difference between racism versus bias, and then what is anti-Blackness. Those are three different things that people tend to like wrap them all up into one. But if we're looking at these, you know, the Karens of the world or Chads of the world, and I apologize to anyone who have those names, and I'm sorry that you get targeted like that. But we can talk about all the variations of those. I think all of us on this panel can tell you too many stories that's going to cover our fingers and toes, and then we need to like look at it, you know, like start counting on other people's hands and toes. But what I want to know is, you know, have you actually witnessed someone, or to you maybe, who actually is being a true and an active ally? And what does that look like, or what has that looked like for you? Because I want other people here that are here to hear your stories to walk away and go, okay, so that's what an active, true ally looks like, right? And so why don't we start with Christian, thoughts?
Allyship, I think for me, you know, as I've shared over the time that we've spent together, you know, it's not easy to enter, for example, my workplace and find myself as one of the very few people of color. I think, you know, folks that are not in my shoes will never understand that feeling. It's not, it will never be easy to walk into Fred Meyer or the local grocery store and not find the very, you know, ingredients that, you know, coming from the Philippines, as I mentioned earlier, my mom or my parents or my family would enjoy making at home. I get it, you know, unless you are a fellow person of color, in my case, fellow Filipino, fellow API person, I get it. You know, you'll never understand what it's like to be in my shoes. And I think, you know, approaching this work with that recognition, approaching this work with empathy and a genuine desire to how they can be an ally. I am not asking, and will never ask for saviors. I don't need white people to come and save me. You know, I want their advocacy. I want them to show up when I need them to be with me, whether that's in a meeting, entering a boardroom where I am the only person of color, and you know, for whatever reason, I'm not seen or I feel invisible. I want my colleagues to step in and say, you know, why haven't we heard from voices like Christians, you know, in the room that perhaps, you know, should also be considered. And so I think true allyship comes from a place of acknowledgement, understanding, and empathy, and genuine interest to help.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the genuineness and the effort that needs to go into it. Raylan, you know, what are your thoughts about it, and have you experienced that true allyship from someone, or have a story around that?
Does my mom count?
Sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask. But I think my biggest thing here is be interested. Don't be interesting. Like, there's been so much me. I mean, I feel like I need to be Oprah. Like, you get a gold star, you get a gold star, you get a gold star, you get a gold star. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not handing out brownie points because you decided to show up and go to a protest. Or because you decided to ask me how I'm doing. You should be able to do that any day of the week and not schedule it because now you notice that I'm part Black. Like, So I would say be interested, be very, very cognizant of asking how people are doing, because to Christian's point, and sorry guys, Christian's on this side of me, to Christian's point, be genuine. Like, we can tell it's disingenuous when you come up to us and you're like, well, how are you doing? But what I really want to know is, what's it like being Black in America? Can you explain that to me? Where can I get all the information to be a better person? I want to be a great ally. Like, I'm sorry, I don't have the energy or the bandwidth to explain how, who, what, when, where, why. I can't give you that gold star. I'm trying to potty train a toddler. So when I look at when I say be interested and not be interesting, you have Google. You have some folks who've done the work for you. There's like 1 million articles on LinkedIn. If you don't feel like it's credible, again, you have Google. So please take the time to do it yourself, but don't sit there and throw it back at me that you did it. Because quite frankly, and I'm gonna curse, I don't give a damn. So, and I mean, I feel like I'm speaking like on Farrell and Antoine's terms here because they're nodding their heads. And same with Kimfer, but we really just we want you to be interested, because if you're interested, the work will never stop. But I need everybody to prove Farrell and Antoine wrong that it's going to end in 30, 60 days. I want you to be interested always. And one of the most beautiful privileges that some people have is that you get to exit it whenever it's too hard for you. You get to step away and say bye-bye. But I don't get to. Christian doesn't get to. Kimfer doesn't get to. Farrell and Antoine, we don't get to be like, oh, well, you know what? That was a rough week. Let me take a break. Let me go back to my scheduled programming. We don't get that. So if you want to be a great ally, do the work on your own, be interested, stand up when you see an injustice happening, but don't ask for a gold star, because you're not getting it from me and you're probably not getting it from the others either. Sorry.
Ooh, I'm going to drop the mic on that. The allyship question, maybe, on this, Antoine, it sounds like you have. I also want to be really thoughtful because we have 4 minutes and we have 2 more questions, and I want to make sure that we give a chance to the voice to the to questions that are coming in as well.
I'll wrap it up real simple. Don't be just an ally, be an accomplice. If you're not willing to get locked up, shot down, shot up for somebody else, just period, then reconsider, right? I mean, the Good Samaritan was a Good Samaritan because they stopped. That's all I'm saying.
Lord, yeah, for sure. There's 2 questions that came in, and one, how can we as marketers, as people who work for companies, demand and make change within our companies and organizations? I feel like we've talked about this a bit, but maybe a little bit more specific. I think, we have 2, like Raylan and Antoine, you own your own business. What do people need to come and ask you for or talk to you about in those kind of scenarios? Christian and Farrell, have worked within organizations. Like, what can you do in these situations?
Who's asking?
Someone in the audience?
No, I mean, like, because it's a different response. Because if a Black person asks me, what am I doing to uphold Black folks, I'm saying this. If it's a white folk, I'm saying this. So, I'll say, well, if it's a Black person, it's a Black-owned business. So anything I do, support the Black-owned business and supporting Black folks moving on Blackness. That's what I'm saying. If it's a white person who is looking like how or what it is, once again, going back to Raylan, did you Google first? Did you Google? I mean, did you Google? Did you Google any question that you have? Did you see if anybody has listed out answers that may be able to direct you? Because you're so right. There's so much time in the day. And if it gets sucked up by simple questions that Google answers, or even Siri probably start answering by now, because Alexa tired too. I know for a fact that you'd be able to cut down work time and productivity at least in half.
Fantastic. And then the other is, does anyone here, and this might be for just a follow up, and I will just raise my hand here. Does anyone here know of any good diversity and inclusion manager training programs and or unconscious bias programs for employees at an organization? I will put a little asterisk to this question for whoever asked this. As a DEI consultant, the first thing I say is no training ever will solve DEI problems.
Yep.
However, there are better ones than others. What you really want is to work with someone, internal or external, that are working on your culture, that is working on a programmatic way to change within the company that then intersects into training as well as workshops. But to just bring in someone to do these kind of trainings is not, that's not gonna work so well. But there are better ones than others. So it looks like Raylan and Farrell, you had your hands up.
Yeah, quick tag on that. Like, a training is a one and done. And a one and done is not going to fix your problems today, tomorrow, or next week. You need to, like Kemper said, look and evaluate the programs themselves and know that you're investing in more than just a training. You're investing in workshops, and it can't be workshops every 3 months. They need to be ongoing workshops that aren't just talking about DEI. They're talking about your leadership as a whole. They're talking about how you are truly like bridging that gap and moving forward. You know, Kemper does it. As far as workshops and teaching how to be strong leaders, I also work for Ampersand. Like, we can help on giving you the right direction and the guidelines. I have a girlfriend named Blair Harvey who also does something very similar. So I would say really, really research those places, but it's not a one and done. You need to put in the time and the money and the effort to see it through to the end, because change didn't happen overnight. It's called time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Farrell? You had you were like.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that regardless of the program you find, everybody needs to start at zero.
Mm-hmm.
The problem you have, and the problem I've had going into organizations, you've been asked to come do trainings, is that you have woke white folks who read White Fragility last week. And, you know, they started thumbing through some Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they saw, you know, I'm not your Negro, and, you know, they're woke now. And, you know, they want to come to the cookout and bring raisins and the potato salad and everything. And now they think they know stuff. So they're going to school everybody else. You're going to have those people in your organization. You're also going to have the white folks who are literally shocked that this is a thing. You're going to have the folks who somehow, through privilege and whiteness, have never had to really sit with the concepts of racism, white supremacy, systemic oppression. It's never been a part of their lives in any way. So you have those people. You also have persons of culture who have had a great deal of privilege and who have had a completely different experience than other persons of culture in your organization. So they're going to be coming at this from a different direction. They're going to have different experiences they're bringing to the table. Any training or any kind of sustained work you do as an organization, it has to start from the idea that we need to start at the same point and move forward from there. We need to build a common language. We need to build a way that we're going to communicate with each other. We need to build a way to sit in discomfort with each other. We need community agreements. We need structure, because that structure, and it doesn't have to be like a cage of structure, for lack of a better term. It needs to be structured in that the conversation needs to have tracks so that the train can stay on. So you're going to have some folks who think they know everything. We're going to have to dip them in the bud early and be like, look, we all in this. You're going to have your persons of culture in your organization who are, some of them are going to be like, do I really got to sit in here with Bob? Like, I sit with Bob every day. Do I really got to sit in this training with Bob too? You're going to run the gamut of people's stressors and people coming to this. You're going to have white tear moments. You're going to have people get super defensive. But you need to be willing to do it together. It has to all start from one point and move forward. And, you know, we always talk about, we want the whole company. And yeah, of course, you want the whole company to be on board and to be a part of this journey. But I think often, like, I'm a big fan of, we need to start with your leadership team first. Because some tell me that your leadership team is a mess. And we need to start with them. I need to get them to function together, because a lot of the issues that I've seen with these things is communication. Everyone's communicating from different areas. And that's not even just a white supremacist issue. That's a leadership issue. That's just like leaders who can't even communicate and function with each other and be able to have a concentrated conversation without people getting in their feelings and throwing people under the bus and this, that, and the other. You got to get leadership legitimately invested in any training programs you do. Because of course, you're gonna have employees who are gonna be interested. Of course, you're gonna have employees who aren't. But 9 times out of 10, the employees are more interested than the leaders. The leaders are like, these things are fine. You know, like I said earlier, we hired some Black folks last week, so we're trending in the right direction. They don't want to have to sit in that discomfort. So it's promoting the idea that we all need to start at zero, and that managers need to start at zero too, are like some of the biggest components of even making this really work and happen. And I understand that you're probably gonna lose some folks along the way. There are gonna be some folks that are gonna bail. They're gonna quit. They're gonna claim that you were treating them poorly. They're gonna go oppression Olympics on you. All their white fragility is gonna come out on the table. And that's even for persons of privilege. Their white fragility is gonna come out too. There's gonna be a mess. And that's a part of it too. It's gonna be messy. And people don't like the fact that it's messy, but it's going to be supremely messy to start unpacking these things.
Yeah, there will be versions of reversal racism that you will hear from people like, no, you're being racist because now you're being racist against me and the white people. And that's
I should get that on a shirt, actually.
Yeah, the interesting part is that happens more often than we like to think that it does. There's actually a really interesting question out on our Q&A. Really great story. Someone chatting about it from Cleveland, Ohio, actually grew up pretty progressive parents. They marched in the 60s. This person is now in their 50s. Their parents marched. They're now in their 50s. And really looking back, want to talk about how things have really changed over the years in their perspective, and how the youth in the USA is just so much more accepting of racial equality and disdain for inequality. I think this was a little bit of what you were talking about, Raylan, right? Sort of born in this new generation. And they're talking about how when they used to be instructed to go follow, back in the day, working in retail in the 70s, late 70s, just before the 80s. And they would literally say, like, you need to go follow these Black people, and assume that they were going to shoplift. And they said at the time they quit, but they didn't have the balls at the time to talk about it, or like all the details that goes with it. But the interesting thing, the question is like, how do I talk about that, saying like, I see the changes that have happened, and there is progress, right? There is progress happening. I love the sentiment, and I thank you so much to Casey for sharing that, and the vulnerability of sharing that story. My interesting thing for me is like, I don't know if it's changed that much, because again, anthropology just came out with the nick and the name that they've given to Black people, and that they had to go follow them around. So I'm just like, maybe not. And I don't know if it's because those kind of companies are still held by people that are in the older generation and the younger people. Thoughts? I mean, we're way past time right now, so I wanted to make sure we had a chance to sort of talk about that, since they took the time to write about it.
So I just want to touch on a little bit. Being the secretary of the Portland NAACP, stationed in the Lloyd Center mall, for those who are watching may not know what that is. That is a mall that was in a historically Black neighborhood, which was vibing at one point in time before the Amazons and those larger stores came in. But I would hear, and so our office space is right next to a Marshall's, and Marshall's on the second floor. And if you know Marshall's demographic, you're going to see just about any and everybody from the upper echelon, those who have the money but want to save $1, to those who don't have the money who want to make $1. And so I would see often theft. I mean, theft happened a lot. And we would get reports. The reason, like, actually why one of the leading reasons why we got in the Lloyd Center was because a customer was being racially profiled in one of the larger stores. And the mall management there got tired of hearing, not just that one time, but several times, of racial profiling within these stores within the mall. And once again, it was like, how do you talk about it? You open your mouth. I mean, that's the first thing and foremost. Once again, if you don't know what it's like to feel like you're being watched, you can't relate to it. If you don't know, and it doesn't matter by color, right? But just being watched because of whatever, you don't know what it's like. And so if you're an observer and you see that, you need to speak up for it, because it doesn't feel good. Not only that, but you can't think that somebody else is going to.
Yeah. Yeah, Raylan, go ahead.
I hope I kind of answered that, but.
So I too worked in retail for a very long time, and I'm weirdly on the flip side of that. I was demoted basically for being Black, but I didn't want to acknowledge that until much later. And I should have spoke up, because the crazy thing is, like, I was close to the people in corporate who had a DEI, but I didn't want to face it. And you're not wrong saying that we've made steps in the right direction. I think change is really hard. There's a lot of pullback on that change. I mean, I touched base on this with Pharaoh the other day. We were talking about a book that my family had written, and I mean, we can literally just go back and just be like, oh yeah, great was an emancipated slave. So we really aren't that far removed from it. And yes, we have made strides, but for those kids, like, I say kids very loosely because I'm fairly close to them, they see that you did that, but it's not enough, because to them, it's not a matter of, oh, Johnny's dad is Black, like, it's no big deal. It's like, you naturally love all the adults who are around you. So it's like, I love Johnny's dad. I love, like, Christian's family, they're Filipino. Like, it's very more like intermeshed for them. So yes, they see that change happen. They did read it in the history book, but for them, this is change happening right now. And with all the, like, anger that came out through that civil rights movement, they're feeling that in this movement. And so they need to feel it. And they're probably not going to listen. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, they're probably not going to listen. They're going to be like, what do you know? You clearly didn't fix it. So just give them grace and forgiveness, and let them deal with their own struggles to try to make change, because it's now their turn to take that next step, because somebody took the steps for emancipation. Somebody took the steps to get out of Jim Crow. Somebody took the steps for desegregation. And now it's our turn to say, now take the steps to actually get to true freedom, because we're not free yet. Just in case you haven't heard, we're not free yet. So, but they need to feel it. They need to be in their feelings that right now, because it took everybody else's feelings in the past to push us forward.
Remember, we're free-ish.
Free adjacent, yeah.
Adjacent. Yeah. Well, I know that we have extremely gone over time, and we still have amazing participation from those that have been here. And I realized that I basically took all the time that I think Hallie and Amber needed to talk a little bit more about AMA. But I wanted to say thank you to the panel for, again, sharing your stories. Just learning more about you, your stories, about all the things, the authentic way that we've been able to talk about this and really share our stories. And those that have been, really been wonderful listening in and asking questions. I just want to say thank you, and thank you to the AMA PDX for making this happen. So I want to make sure I give time back to Hallie to make sure you have a chance with the audience that is still there to finish up what you needed to do. So thank you for allowing us to have all the extra time. I really appreciate it.
No worries at all. I wanted to again say thank you so much for being vulnerable, for sharing your stories. I mean, it was just great. So I know there are a lot of people still on the line. Silent clap for all of them. It was just great. So again, thank you so much. Wonderful event. All right, I'll go ahead and finish this off. So quick side, just giving you a breakdown about the AMA PDX Board of Directors. This is basically everyone who puts the events on, who makes the board year run. So a big thank you to our Board of Directors. For those of you who don't know, this is our last event of our board year, other than an upcoming volunteer celebration where we're just celebrating our work. So our last workshop of the year, and a big special thank you to Amber Young, who's our VP of Programming, who helps put all these events on. So yeah, super exciting. Great last event. Okay, so as I said, we have our year-end volunteer celebration. This is June 24th at 6 p.m. It's a free online event, donations encouraged. So what we'll be doing is coming together virtually to celebrate all of the hard work that all of our volunteers have done throughout the year, our board members. We'll also be highlighting our AMA PDX agency project groups. We have 6 really great nonprofits part of our AMA PDX agency program this year. We have Free Geek, Junior Achievement of Oregon and Southwest Washington, Kinship House, Farmers Market Fund, The Living Room, and Rahab Sisters. So if those of you who don't know about AMA PDX Agency, it's a program where we basically find volunteers, marketing volunteers, to do project work for nonprofits who apply to be part of the program. And the projects run 6 months, starting from January through June. That's personally how I became involved in AMA PDX, and it's just a really great program. So if you're interested in giving back or volunteering for AMA PDX Agency, you can always contact us, but I'll get to that. For the volunteer celebration, we are of course inviting all of our community to join and celebrate with us. We are also going to be donating all of the donations that we raise from this event, split between all 6 of the nonprofits that we're supporting. And at the very end of the event, we're going to have 3 breakout rooms to join in for networking and conversation. We'll have a job seekers group, we'll have a DEI group, and AMA PDX if you just want to learn more about our organization and how to become involved. And support AMA PDX, become a member. So we are driven by our members and our membership. This is just a quick list of some of the things that our local chapter provides to our members. It's only $149 a year. This is actually down from the $300 a year that it was. So this is a new member price if you're interested in joining. First of all, for AMA PDX, you get discounted event tickets, including to Max Awards. For the last few months, just to support marketers with COVID, we did make our events free and donation-based, but starting July, we'll be back up and running our event at a cost. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you'll be able to join those events at a discount. We have networking events, professional development events, luncheons, special events. We do holiday events. Again, our annual Max Awards celebration in February. We also have members only emails and special offers, gift certificates, and we also have free member only events. Our last one was basically to help our members with the new job market, with the changing job market with COVID. We also share all of our slides with all of our members after each event, regardless of if they registered or not, just so they have access to the slides and the recording. Also new with COVID, we have access to other professional chapter events. Right now, a lot of other professional chapters are hosting a lot of free events. So we've been sharing those out with our members to join online for free. And like I said, we also share the recordings that's new with COVID this year. And then we also have joint member pricing with SEM PDX and PRSA, 2 other joint marketing organizations here in town. So if you're a member of one of our organizations, you get member pricing at the other organizations. We also have an array of benefits that AMA Nationals provides, including discounted certifications and free publications from Nationals. So again, if you're interested, please learn more at ama-pdx.org/membership. Also, we want you to become involved with our organization. We have a lot of ways that you can become involved, and here are just a few. Right now, we have our mentor-mentee virtual program. So if you're interested in being a marketing mentor or mentee, you can contact us. And then we also have a job shadow program. The in-person job shadow program got put on hold, but when we're all able to go back in the office and when regular life resumes, you'll be able to either host a job shadower or be a job shadower. So you can apply to be part of that program for when we get that up and running again in person. And then of course we have our agency, like I spoke about. You can apply to be part of the 2021 cohort. Again, that all of the programs and projects start in January of next year. So we look for volunteers sometime around October, November this year. Also, you can partner with us. We are currently looking for our partners to sponsor our webinar subscription for July through June of 2021. Again, our board year ends in end of June and kicks off at the beginning of July. So we're looking for partners for a variety of things. But again, foremost, we need a strong webinar platform like the one we have today. So if you know anyone interested, any organizations interested in sponsoring our webinar platform, we'd be super thankful. So please reach out. And then we also have a monthly newsletter that we send to stay in the know, available to anyone. You don't just have to be a member, and you can register for that on our website. Again, please become a member of AMA PDX and volunteer with us. So volunteer opportunities. We have a few openings left on the board of directors starting in July. We have a director of workshops, director of volunteers, director of virtual programming, and director of podcasts. The last two are new positions on our board for next year. We have job descriptions for all of these. So if you are interested in any of them, please email us at info@ama-pdx.org, and we'll follow up with a job description and a follow-up call to give you some more information. And then I would like to thank our luncheon sponsor. If we were to have this event, it would be in person. And we have our luncheon sponsor, Oregon State University MBA program, and they host all of our luncheon events in person. And we also have the University of Oregon, and they are, it's a school of journalism, and they sponsor our workshop events. So we do partner with those two local universities to hold all of our events. So I'm super thankful for them. I'm hoping to continue the partnership with them through next year, but again, look at the way things are going. We'll probably be holding our events virtually. And then again, a special thanks to all of our other partners. We have Ringside Steakhouse, like I said, the School of Journalism, Columbia Sportswear, who gives us some cool gift cards to give out to our members, Perkins & Co., who gives us a certified CPA to do all of our taxes every year, 52 Limited, and more. So again, if you have any companies interested in partnership, please email us. And then lastly, I wanted to touch base on how AMA PDX is giving back during COVID. So we have actually decided to donate $1,000 at the end of June to Easter Seals. And that Easter Seals is actually a 2015 AMA PDX agency nonprofit. So all donations raised during our June events, other than the volunteer celebration, will be going towards that $1,000. So I wanted to thank you all so much for your donations to this event. And a little bit more about Easter Seals. Like I said, they are, that's America's largest healthcare nonprofit. They are committed to the comprehensive health and wellness of more than 1.4 million people that they serve each year. And they're prepared to respond to the needs of the 1 in 4 Americans living with disability today, with outcomes-based services for our disabilities throughout the lifespan. They have 23 different locations and programs in Oregon, serving our veterans, seniors, homeless, unemployed, and people with disabilities. So again, a really great organization. I encourage you all to look them up at easterseals.com/Oregon. And that's all I have. So thank you so much for joining. Again, we'll be sending out the recording, and we'll also be sending an online survey via email. We really appreciate your feedback on the survey. You can denote if you're interested in membership, if you're interested in getting involved. You can also give us a quote for social media that we'll use. So again, thanks so much, and hope you have a great weekend.